So hi, everybody. Welcome to our webinar today titled Guiding Board Meetings to Maximise Productivity. My name's Sean McDonald, and I'll be your moderator for the next 45 odd minutes. Firstly, thanks for attending today. We really appreciate the effort you've made to be here for our live event. And during the session, if you have any questions, please use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen, and we'll have a Q&A session at the end of the webinar this time. We'll try to get through as many of your questions as we have time for. And finally, if you stay through till the end, which we hope you will do, and as customary for our webinars, we have a special treat for you. By answering our 1-minute survey, you'll go into our draw to win a beautiful gift hamper worth over $400. Now, for those who don't know Board Pro, we're a board software provider, sometimes called a board portal, that serve over 20,000 users around the world. We enable these organizations to prepare for and run their board meetings more efficiently and effectively with clever software, of course, with less time, and deliver more impact and value for their organization. And as much as we are a board software provider, part of our wider mission is to make the fundamentals of governance free and easy to implement for all organizations, especially those with resource constraints. And how we do these, or how we do this, is through these webinars, along with the many guides, templates, and white papers you'll find on our website via our Governance Resource Centre, which is boardpro.com/resource-centre. Let me now introduce our fabulous panel for today, starting with Mike Burke, who is a multi-company director and chair who specializes in helping owners and executives grow their organizations. Mike is the managing director of Point 16, a business growth think tank and consultancy charged with unleashing the next generation of business brilliance. They help businesses grow quickly and sustainably through elegant strategy and next level management principles. Mike also coaches business owners, management, and C-level corporates on strategy, leadership, management, and workplace performance. Welcome to you, Mike.
Kia ora, thanks for having me.
Julie Garland-McLennan is one of the few women to have a portfolio of boards, including chairing an ASX-listed company, and is respected for her practical experience. She is a frequent speaker at conferences and a prized reference for journalists. She has developed and delivered director education for the Governance Institute of Australia, the Australian Institute of Company Directors, and leading international institutions. Julie works with company directors and chairs to help them to build the success they desire in the boardroom. Good afternoon to you, Julie.
Good afternoon. Likewise, a pleasure.
Brett is our CEO and co-founder here at Board Pro. Brett is a serial entrepreneur, having built several high-growth businesses over the last 20 years, and he's created a $10 million exit value in an ICT business, persevered through to a modest exit on his first startup, and carried the lessons of that into Board Pro's burgeoning success around the world. Brett brings tenacity, a strategic mindset, strong generalist business skills, and enduring curiosity to the table. Good afternoon to you, Brett.
Thank you, Sean. Kia ora and welcome, everyone.
So let me now hand over to Mike to get us started.
Thank you, Sean. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Ko Mike Burke, tōku ingoa. Ko o te kai whakahaere o Point 16. Tēnā nui, te mihi, kia koutou I hui hui mai nei e tēnā rā. Kia ora, thank you. My name's Mike Burke. As Sean quite elegantly put it, I'm the managing director of Point 16. I'm also a director of a company called PEP Worldwide. The reason why I bring up PEP Worldwide is because we're actually going to, PEP is a workplace productivity specialist. They're a global consultancy in the productivity in the workplace company. And we're going to leverage some of their principles today as this is around board productivity. How we're going to craft this this webinar today is it's cut into 3 different areas, and it's the sort of the 3 effective board management areas: board strategy, board planning, and board meeting execution. To support that, I've actually brought along 10 productivity principles, tips, tricks, hacks, whatever you want to call them. And I've associated some of the best ones for each section or each area of effective board management. So let me get started with board strategy. when establishing a board or establishing the effectiveness of a board, I would use these 5 things as a quick checklist. Don't mistake their simplicity for lack of effectiveness, because I think if you've got an unproductive board or board with too much friction or things aren't happening very well in a meeting, a lot of the solutions could be solved proactively in this checklist. So I'll cover these very quickly and then get into the productivity tips here. So one is making sure that your company or the organization that the board serves has strategy and goals. Like we covered in a last webinar with Julie a few weeks ago, it's really interesting and really fundamental to know that the board is simply a team of a company of people. As you would with a sales team, a finance team, an operations team, they all play a role in serving the company achieving their goals. The board is no different. So making sure that the board, before you set up a board, knowing what the company's purpose and goals are vital. Then leading to a board purpose, very similar to as you might have a sales strategy or a sales purpose, making sure that your board has a purpose. The difference between a board and another functional team is directors have legal responsibilities. So making sure that you can articulate and you know that and that all of the directors know what the purpose is of that board, both legally and strategically. Board selection is vital. Just like you would with any team, what you want at your board is to make sure that your board complements and is going to add value or give value for that company achieving that strategy. And also to make sure that you have a good selection, you've really leaned in on diversity, and not just diversity from traditional minds, but also skill set, experience, and working style and thinking style to make sure everything gets considered when you're making those big decisions. Board onboarding, bringing your directors on board is vital, making sure that that is elegant and clear to prevent unproductive issues later on. And board documentation and agreements, whether that's charters, responsibilities, agreements, as to what you want each director to provide. So with those as the clear checklists at a board strategy level, let me give you some productivity tips that can also help you pull your board together really well. The first one is what we call at both Point 16 and PEP is the goal, role, remind principle. Really, the goal, role, remind principle is really about leadership and people engagement. And if you think of your board similar to a team, making sure that your team are extraordinarily engaged is going to mean that your board meetings and your board is going to be productive as a result. If your board is disengaged or have moments of disengagement, that's going to drop your productivity. So to give you a quick rundown on goal, role, remind, is all you need to do to have an engaged team are those 3 things. Sorry, can we just go back, Sean? You're good. Is these 3 areas. If you have disengagement, you're probably missing one or more of these 3 things. Make sure everybody knows what the goal is. Have a goal. I think that's fundamental, but make sure everyone knows what the goal is. Make sure everyone is clear on their role, that their role will impact the goal. So that gives them purpose, but also make sure that they know that their role in isolation is not going to have the goal be achieved, that they need other people with other roles contributing. And the last one is reminding. We're human, we forget things. You need to constantly remind people of the goal. You need to constantly remind people of their role. If they're doing an incredible job, remind them with a high five. If they're doing an okay job, remind them with a thank you. And if they're doing a poor job, remind them by asking them for help. Thanks, Sean.
Julie, you had a question?
Yeah, I was just going to comment that the role of the board changes as your organization grows, as the people on the board change and the skills and availabilities. So if you're finding that the roles are chafing and they're uncomfortable and they don't fit, change the role, change the style of board or the governance mode that you're using, and really make sure that you keep the goal and the role and the current status of the organization in balance. I find that often when people are chafing, it's because the roles have become outdated and nobody's updated them. Sean, you posted on LinkedIn recently. I think perhaps we can find a link to that post and share it in the chat. I know I can't post in the chat because I'm a panelist, but that might be of interest to some of the people here.
Was that the, what board are you on?
That was the one.
I shall find the link and send it on chat. Brett,
Thank you.
any comments from you, Brett?
Yeah, look, I just wanted to endorse the remind in particular. It's interesting for us as a 7-8-year-old startup scale up now that in the early days, everything is kind of simple. Everything takes subservience to the fact if you actually got a product people want to, use and then purchase. But as you go on and the organization scales, it is so critical to have what's our mission and purpose? What's our reason for being? What's our place in the world? And people hear that in the beginning, but as they're with you for years, they forget, we drift. I just think it's such a neat little model, Mike, that remind you. I wouldn't ordinarily think of it to just continuously remind. You look at the likes of Xero, investor presentations 10 years and Xero, the big accounting software business worldwide now, they would often have a reminder of their purpose or their vision statement at the beginning of their investor document. So thank you.
Yeah, bang on. And thanks for contributing. I think, pressure testing goals, pressure testing purpose, and pressure testing vision. And if they don't really resonate with, especially at C-suite or board, like because the purpose is just a tool or a resource for a company of people to achieve great things for commercial benefit, right? And so realize that tools have expiry dates, or you upgrade your tool. And just because you made that purpose in 1997 or 2019, a lot's happened between both of those days. The purpose probably the resource played its role, but it might need an upgrade now. What we're looking at here are the the efficiency principles at PEP Worldwide. And I'm not going to dwell on this because, these are quite close to my heart. I could talk all day, but let me just cover this and then cover how these can work from a board strategy. A place for everything in its place. Making sure everything has a home reduces a lot of conscious thought around where things are at, either in progress or where a document might be. Most frequently used information closest to hand. So this may work out, especially if you're going to have a decision, and if you've got a team charter and you want to remind your board of the team charter always, frequently, and you want people to recall the stuff always, you should make that really easy, one click away, rather than having them try and navigate or use a search function to find it. Related items are grouped together. This concept of batching, which I will get back into a little bit later on, make things easy for yourself and for others, and only keep what you need. Archiving and deleting is thoroughly underutilized while we have a huge wave of data coming at us. These efficiency principles, if you can just take this from a strategy point of view, making sure that your team, your purpose statements, your strategies, your role definitions, all of that documentation is housed somewhere, and then how you group that and how you think about how people can access that in the future is a really good way to ensure there's less friction and more productivity later on down the track. Brett or Julie, they're my two productivity principles regarding board strategy. I know we retroed goal or remind. Anything here that you want to touch on before we move on to planning and meetings?
I'd be remiss if I didn't call out that modern board software like Board Pro and many others will do quite a chunk of the efficiency principles here for you if you're functioning on a board. Having a searchable document repository, modern board software will surface up your most recent board meetings, your action items. So it's a really good, simple way, and you can buy it inexpensively these days to get quite a bit of efficiency into the board.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'd just add that this doesn't only apply to boards.
No.
It applies to life in general. And I was just thinking about my untidy wardrobe and house when I looked at this slide the first time. And the other thing is that only keep what you need. We all have these rules about we've got to store stuff, we've got to keep our records for 7 years, but it's very easy to forget to delete them after those 7 years. And if you look at some of the recent big information breaches, some of that information had been held for more than 10 years. It was completely useless to the organization holding it, but it was still a source of risk. So really think about your document retention and your document destruction.
Yeah, that's a really great insight, Julie. And if you want to nerd out on those efficiency principles at home, think about your kitchen. And if you think about real estate, you know, what's on the counter, what's in the top drawers, what are the things that you go to most frequently? And, you know, next thing you'll realize is, you know, that kitchen mixer that I use once a month probably shouldn't take that high-end real estate on the top of the counter. I know that's what I did personally, was when I first did it 12 years ago, was bother my wife changing the kitchen. It's awful now. Okay, let me move on to board planning. So this is fundamental, and I think some CEOs, some chairs, some directors do this really well, and I think when this and some don't, and I think if this don't mistake the simplicity for lack of effectiveness here either. So the planning and the preparation for a board meeting is vital to ensure that you have a highly productive board meeting. One thing is cadence, and don't think, and the reason why I put cadence here isn't so much just around frequency. Do we catch up monthly or do we catch up quarterly? There's a few dimensions to this. Do couple frequency and duration. So if you catch up more frequently, you don't have to catch up as long. But if you want to catch up less frequency, you probably want to allow for more time for your board to get together, for your board to understand. It probably also means you need more content in your pre-reads. Also, the difference between in-person and virtual cadence. So there are a lot of hybrid boards now, especially where you have directors in multiple locations. But don't necessarily rely that you have to do every board meeting in person, but definitely don't have all of your board meetings virtually. One thing that is starting to become a little bit more common is, say, 2 virtual, 1 in person if you're running monthly. So once a quarter you get in there in person. But do have a look around what does your company strategy need and apply the right cadence. Agendas are huge. You're going to hear everybody talk about the power of agenda if you do it well. So choose the right selection. There is a whole lot of science behind what items to put in order. We'll cover a little bit of this, and I know Julie will talk at length about this as well. And what requirements and expectations. Not every agenda item weighs the same. Sometimes you're going to want people just to know, you're going to want constructive discussion, and some you're going to want to make decisions. So make sure that those expectations are set in the planning. Pre-reads, try and go for your Goldilocks pre-reads, not too much, not too little, but make sure every pre-read has a purpose that connects to your agenda and the strategy. And if you know and can articulate what your ideal outcomes or possible FAQs are, you're going to have an extraordinarily productive meeting. So let's go through some of the productivity tips that can help you with board planning. We call this the wrap. This could be the weekly review and action plan or the workload review and action plan. And this is just taking the 5 minutes or the 10 minutes to just stop, have a look and have a think and a review, and then make a good plan. You will notice that this will come back at the end of a board meeting, but before you send out your agenda, before you start planning your board meeting, do stop, do review. What do we need? The meeting is simply a resource. What do you need out of that resource? And plan accordingly. The batching principle, I'm not going to go into these efficiency principles again, but being able to group all of these together or really rely on efficiency principle number 3 there is the concept of batching. So this concept where if you want to talk to someone or talk to a director, or you've got a couple of questions, and you can find inefficiencies where you're having these one-off conversations, one agenda item at a time, to 6 different people on 6 different phone calls before the meeting. If you batch all those together and identify which are important and which are urgent, you can batch them all and have one conversation with 6 people all in one go. And now all of a sudden you've just made yourself and your board a lot more efficient. So really lean in on the batching principle. Next one, Sean. The big rock principle. I'm not going to do this analogy. I think everyone knows this. This has been around for decades. But the concept here is you want to prioritize your big rocks first, because if you fill your jar full of sand, you're not going to give yourself enough time to really tackle those big rocks. So look at your agenda. When you're doing your plan, understand what are the things that you need from that meeting or that you need from your board, and what is the priority, and make sure you give enough time to your big rocks. Yes, perfect. Which leads beautifully into the prioritization principle. This is a tool from Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Successful People. You can punch it all out if you like, Sean. Effectively, the TLDR on this one is that there are quadrants. I think everyone's seen this. You can have urgent tasks and less urgent tasks, important tasks and not important tasks. What a lot of boards can fall into the trap of mistaking urgent for important. And the concept here is that if you are constantly dealing with urgent items, or you're prioritizing urgent needs, your board is constantly in crisis management, although it might not feel like it. A normal organization or a normal performer will spend 60 to 70% of their time in Q1, urgent and important. But high-performing teams spend 70 to 80% of their time in Q2. And if that is a shock to you, definitely relook at your agenda and get onto the proactive flywheel of dealing on important first. Because if you can deal with the important and less urgent, you will never be in crisis, or you'll be in crisis far less often. So with those 4 principles, Julie, I know you want to talk about agendas and the bell curve of warm-ups and warm-downs, because ever since I've heard you talk about it, I think of aerobics. Do you want to chime in on that, Julie?
Yeah, I think this whole idea of prioritizing, getting the big stuff done is really important, but it's also important to remember that we're dealing with human beings. If we're in a not-for-profit, such as a community social service charity, we might be meeting in the evenings when everybody's already tired. So people might not have the mental energy and the ability to focus. So when you're looking at how often should we meet, look at how many big rocks you have and how many you can realistically advance through decisions in a single meeting. You probably only want to have 2 or maybe 3 big decisions to make at each meeting and a few more small ones. I always suggest, yes, put them early in the agenda, but not right up front, because when you first arrive at the meeting, your energy levels and your enthusiasm might be high, but your focus is low. And it takes a little bit of time being there in the meeting, going through the minutes and the matters arising and the attendance and the apologies, just to start getting your brain really focused, and then to move on into that hard work. And then as you start to get tired, to actually stop working hard and start putting your time and attention into the more routine decisions, the housekeeping, the less urgent and less important stuff that just has to be done. So I would work on that. The other thing that I would suggest is use your pre-reading. If you can get people as ready as possible with your pre-reading so that your discussions take less time and energy. And if you don't have a decision, don't put it on the agenda. Put it out as a piece of information for people to read when they want to read, and make it very clear. We don't expect you to discuss this. We just expect you to read it and know it. So really save and prioritize that quality meeting time for those important big rock decisions. And there's a question in the chat from Georgie that I'm burning to answer about what do you do if you have a couple of board members who turn up not having read. Georgie, if you're the chair, say, I'll take the document as read, turn to one of those and say, would you like to start us off? Trust me.
That's some of that constructive friction we talked about a few weeks ago, isn't it?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Or you can ring them before the meeting and say, look, this is a big decision. I'd really like to have you take the lead on this. So as soon as we open the discussion, I'll throw to you, are you cool with that? And if you give them 48 hours notice, they'll probably read the papers in those 48 hours. So you don't have to be quite so nasty as I was suggesting, but make it very clear as well when you're recruiting directors that you must be prepared when you come to the meeting. Make it clear in your charter or your constitution that these things are expected. Make it clear in your nominations process, and really come down like a ton of bricks on anyone who does not do as you expect and need them to do.
Well, I've got a follow-up question for you, Julie, seeing as you're doling out good practical advice. So I find our board meetings are typically 3 hours. I find 2 or 3 big rocks we can get through. Sometimes the agenda naturally squeaks out to up to 5 or 6, and we're under pressure. What advice would you have on either reduce, what do you do there where there's suddenly 5 or 6? Is it reduction of rocks, or is it extend the meeting? Give us some feedback.
Yeah, either reduce the rocks, extend the meeting, have 2 meetings. There's nothing that says you can't have a meeting on a Tuesday and a meeting on a Thursday. You can, if you planned to get through something and then in the course of your discussions, you discover that actually this is a harder, tougher meeting, you can adjourn and reconvene. So you don't need to call it a separate meeting. You just adjourn, stop taking minutes, and start taking the minutes a few hours or a few days later. So there are a number of really practical tools that you can use. But the best thing of all for me is the annual agenda. Look at what do we absolutely have to do this year, and make sure that you don't overload any one meeting. And typically it's the meeting immediately after the end of the financial year that gets overloaded with the financial review. So you want to be able to clear meeting other topics from that agenda to put them into adjacent agendas. And you might find that you want to have an extra meeting just to allow you to do that more comfortably. Every board's unique, but cater to your board and your directors and their energy levels.
Thank you.
And that brings us neatly into board meeting execution.
Board meetings, yes. And again, to build on there from yourself, Brett, is I think if it's repetitive, you've got too many big rocks or the rocks are too big, feel free to break them down into manageable chunks, or rely on your management team more to do more of the thinking and suggested discussion or recommendation. So rely on more people as 2 extra tools. Okay, so board meeting execution. So again, I don't think anything in here is going to be fundamentally new, but I think the richness will be in how you can apply it or go a little bit deeper. So make sure that there is a board meeting plan. Make sure you rely on tools. I know this webinar is sponsored by Board Pro, but there is a reason why Board Pro, does help, especially for SMEs and not-for-profit organisations, because tools can really, you can really leverage tools into the productivity of your board, and you don't have to rely on human. Board mindset per agenda item. So a really good chair should be able to guide what the mindset is of the board for each item. And that's why when Julie was talking about, you want to warm up your board and then get into some of the grunty stuff, and then and not finish on high risk agenda items and sort of roll it back out. make sure that you are setting and facilitating where the mindset should be on every agenda item. Chair management and execution is vital. So, making sure that we have the right level of friction, that there is friction management, that you do have constructive friction, that the conversation and pace and tone is right for each agenda item, and that you are looking at constructive versus unconstructive deep dives or rabbit holes. Sometimes going a little bit deeper, make sure you've got that in your time so you can go a little bit deeper and explore, but the chair should know when it's constructive versus unconstructive, and make sure you've got amazing minute capture. So let's go through some productivity principles that can help board meeting execution. So there's the workflow principle, the do it or now or decide now. So if you require this principle, it's probably because you're not getting to a resolution fast enough. And you can do it now, or you can decide now. And here's the 4 things that you can decide with it. Not everything needs to be actioned. Not everything needs to have full resolution in a board meeting. Sometimes you can decide to delete it. You can decide to have someone else work on it and decide it for you. You can decide in the room right then and there, now is not the time. We should defer this and date it and do it somewhere later on. And you can also go, this isn't for a decision. Let's deposit it, file it away for quick recall later on. Being able to embrace these, what Pep would call these 4Ds or the 4D principles, will also help that you don't need to treat every conversation or every decision the same. And if you can call it or decide now and decide early, you will get onto some of the agenda items or some of the topics that are going to add a lot more productivity and a lot more gravitas towards your meeting. Next one, Sean. Flow state. With the interest of time, I'm not going to go quite deep into flow state. I'm going to assume everyone understands, even if just principally, that there is a thing called flow state and being in the zone. And if you've been on multiple boards before, or if you've been on a board, even the same board over a long period of time, you'll understand that you can have boards that go in and out of flow state, where productivity is maximum or feels maximum with minimum energy. This can be achieved, and it can be achieved relatively effortlessly if you know how. There is this concept of team flow state. So please, if you get this document later on, please go through this and read this with a little bit more care. But if we go into the next slide, Sean, here's 2 or 3 things, team agreements and language use that can really help you get in and out of flow. So making sure that you have that board meeting charter, and that on the goal roll remind, you're reminding people of the charter every time. What it'll do is it'll remove unnecessary thought or unnecessary conversation, because it will remind people the purpose of the meeting. So your ability to go into flow state on purpose will happen a lot easier. Language is so important. Just this morning, I was talking to one of our executives, and there was a word provocation, and the 2 people that were looking at the word took very different definition out of the word provocation, and as a result, were defending different areas of it. So make sure you have common language. If you've got language that's in your company strategy or in your board charter, really lean in on it. One language that we use at point 16 is 3 out of 10, 5 out of 10, 7 out of 10. So if I'm at a board meeting and I say, hey guys, I've got an idea, it's 3 out of 10. What I'm saying to them is it's really early, and the feedback I want is on direction. So if I don't have this perfect, and especially for the blue-brained, highly detailed people, are going to go, oh, that'll never work because legal reasons. That's not that's made it unproductive. But by simply just stating up front, hey, can I 3 out of 10 this? I'm going to get feedback directionally. Versus if I've been thinking about it for a while and I'm like, hey, I need 7 out of 10 feedback. I don't care about feedback directionally. The strategy's already been decided. I care about detail. What is the nuance? Where are the I's and the T's being crossed? Lastly, I'll just capture that last point. A flow killer are distractions, interruptions, multiple handling, and procrastinations. Be mindful of them. If things are a bit, phones, people walking in, making sure it is a safe space, the time that you have, because all four of those things will just kill flow. Thanks, Sean. And lastly, wrap every board meeting. We were talking about this just yesterday. If you're finding that there is repetitive or unnecessary friction, or you could be more productive, take 5 minutes at the end of every board meeting. Stop. You could even finish the minutes, close the meeting. Last thing, guys and girls, let's do a retro. How did that go? What was some of the behavior we really enjoyed that we want to replicate? And what was some of the behavior that we didn't enjoy, that held us back, that made us unproductive? And then if there is a repetitive thing and you get common agreement, turn it into a team agreement, even add it into your meeting charter. The next slide is a summary slide of everything we've covered, from the 3 areas of effective board meetings on the left and all the principles that I've covered today on the right. And now I encourage Julie and Brett and everyone who may or may not have asked a question let's have a conversation about anything specific that people would like to chat about. But first, Julie, is there anything in the board meeting that needs further attention?
Yeah, I totally agree with you on the review, and people go, oh, we're so busy, we don't have time. It's going back to Stephen Covey, which is where you started us. You've got to stop and sharpen your saw, or you won't be able to cut down trees as effectively. So really important, what gets measured gets done. If you measure your effectiveness, you will naturally start to improve it. There's a lovely question in the chat from Vikram about how do you make sure the information you're provided with is genuine. Really important, because very often with boards, you're making these big decisions and they're about the future. And as Mark Twain said, what was it? Prediction is really difficult, especially about the future. You've got no idea really what's going to happen. So every director needs to bring that independent, diligent, and specific research. And again, this goes right back to the beginning where we talked about the board planning, that pre-reading, so that when you read your board papers, first of all, it should be clear in your board papers that these are the key important decisions that we must make this meeting. These are the important discussions that we want to have this meeting, and this is the rest. And then when it is those key decisions, to make them responsibly, you need to do your own homework. Ask ChatGPT about it. Ask Google. Maybe tap your director mentor, or ask a friend who's had a similar issue that they've had to deal with. Just do some sanity checking. And remember, if it looks too good to be true, it's probably too good to be true. People nodding off to sleep in your meetings.
What?
Make your meetings scarier. But I would suggest, first of all, make your meetings very purposeful. Keep them energetic. If you see people starting to struggle with their personal energy levels, maybe get the board to stand up and move around and do something. Sticking Post-its on a whiteboard and then sitting back down again. It's amazing the oxygen boost that gives your brain. Have a word with them. Ask them about how to handle better their obvious energy deficiencies that occur during your meeting. See if they perhaps need encouraging to have a siesta. I grew up in South America. I'm a great believer in siestas. I just wish that one day, all-day board meetings had a big enough lunch break for me to have one. It does make me more productive in the afternoon. And if I can't have a siesta, I'll have 2 coffees. No problem.
Brett, any comments from you, Brett?
Oh, look, brilliant, Julie. I'm going to co-opt, I see there's a cute question from Gavin about chairs. I'm going to co-opt it into a wider purpose and put it to you, Mike. I'm looking at your very good seminar and I'm thinking of material you've just shared with us. It feels like the chair is the primary responsibility for making board meetings productive. How would you respond to that?
I don't think it's fundamental. If you don't have a good chair, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're not going to have a great meeting. But I do think it's one of the major recipes that can really help a meeting that might be starting to derail get back on track. I think if you don't have a great chair, but you do everything else really well, so great strategy and great planning, you're going to have a really good meeting anyway. But that, having an exceptional chair is a value multiplier on your board meeting. So not a non-negotiable, but definitely a value add.
What about in terms of applying all of these efficiency tips that you've shared with us, Mike? My observation, having observed 20-odd board members over a couple of companies I've served as CEO, is some of that stuff happens organically, but not a lot of it. It appears to me to be something that needs to be purposeful. And I guess the chair would be the first person to purposefully use this sort of material.
Yeah, for sure. Like any principle in work or in life, the elegance is in their simplicity. It's not rocket surgery, but making sure that, I suppose it comes back to, your focus becomes your reality. And so if you're focusing on these with intention and you can articulate it, the achievement of it is going to come so much easier. And so while, you don't need to know these principles to have an effective or a productive board, not by any sense of the imagination, but using these and focusing on these initiatives and principles is going to make sure that you get there on purpose and not by accident. And a role of the chair could simply be just to remind people what these principles are, just to make sure that there is focus on them. It's not the chair's responsibilities that everyone knows, the depth of these principles. We covered 10 principles in half an hour. They're pretty easy to pick up. But a reminder, a clear set of, and if the chair has that as a small prompt for themselves and then can pass that on to the rest of the board, you're going to be productive on purpose, not by accident.
Thanks,
we have a couple of questions here. Let's see if we can get through them. From
Sure.
Babette. How does the board mindset on a topic vary from the CEO mindset on the topic?
Well, that's a great question. Julie, do you want to jump in on that one or do you want me to take that one?
I'm happy to jump in. I think it varies from board to board, but the CEO is always naturally going to focus on how. How do I deliver this? How can we do this? Whereas the board should, if they are not an operating board, and there's nothing wrong with being an operating board if that's what you have and what you need, but the board should more naturally be focused on why. Why would we do this? What's in it for us? Does it advance us towards our purpose? Does it achieve the vision? And it's the area where those two coincide, that's where it's such a delight to work with a board and a CEO on a really important issue.
Yeah, and to build on that is, remember, at a board, you need diversity in a board more than any other. So having executive viewpoints and an executive background versus a non-executive background is, those mindsets are really important and they've got to come together. And if they clash, you've got to work through that. If they're in agreement, great. But I think the different backgrounds will add value. I suppose it's mindset. When I talked about mindset, making sure that the chair can navigate mindset, it's more around when a piece of data is given, that everyone approaches that piece of data the same way. Am I just consuming this to know it? Am I prepared to give an opinion, or are we making a decision on it?
We have time just for one last question. How would you get engagement from chairman and directors if they have not read the material and require the company secretary to provide a summary of key items where decisions are required?
I'd suggest that you don't want engagement from those guys. You want disengagement, and you should be suggesting to them that perhaps they should take their wonderful, beautiful CVs and use them to embellish somebody else's board. It is difficult, and every director will at some stage turn up to a meeting feeling that they are not properly prepared. But what you really want is to encourage people to read the material, and if they haven't read it, to at least fess up. But very dangerous to make decisions without understanding the information that you're making the decision on, where it was sourced, how it's been handled and presented and delivered to you, how it's been edited, what's been cropped off, all of that sort of thing. So just asking the secretary, okay, give us a list, these are the 5 decisions, yes, yes, no, no, yes. That would, in my book, be negligent and a breach of your director duties in Australia or in New Zealand, and indeed in any other country where I've had a look at the corporations legislation.
I agree wholeheartedly. I think to make good decisions, you need to know information. And so pre-reads provide the information to be able to make an effective decision. I think in saying that, people can always get better at communication. You can, and if the directors are doing things well but are being overloaded with information, you can use TLDR, too long didn't read. You can use top-down communication principles and practices. But regardless, if people aren't reading the packs and coming in unprepared, yeah, that's borderline negligence.
Yeah, I'd just jump
beyond the border.
Yeah, very true, Julie.
I'd just supplement that. I agree with both Mike and Julie. First port of call is to try and change the behaviour, and then you'd have to consider, if you're a board member with fellow board members not reading, whether you can sustainably stay on that board, because you've got legal liability. You're joined with their decisions. You'd ultimately probably want to get off that board.
Yeah, definitely, it's dangerous to stay. There are people who have greatly regretted being on the wrong board. And as Adam J. Epstein, who's a governance expert in what he considers to be small to medium companies, which is anything less than 250 million US. Gee, I'd like to be that small. But he always says nobody ever got into trouble with a judge because they turned down a director seat.
I'm going to answer the last question.
If they smell, they smell.
What do you do when your chair continuously turns up 20 minutes late? This is goal roll remind territory. You know what the goal is. You know what your role is, Chair. I'm going to remind you that this is not good enough behaviour. I think, especially in New Zealand, we're not very good at giving quick, fast, constructive or challenging feedback fast enough. And if they're not willing to change that behaviour, because if the role of chair is valuable to achieving that goal, and part of that role is being on time, you need to let them know and remind them. And then everything else would just be about appeasing them by either starting, putting an invite 20 minutes early, starting at 20 minutes later. But that's just sort of enabling bad behaviour. I would rely on goal roll remind to use one of the productivity principles on that.
Thanks.
Yeah, or have a look at the meeting time. If there's a really good practical reason, like the first train that will get me there leaves before I've finished work, and the next train gets me there half an hour later, then start your meeting half an hour later and have everybody half an hour later. You need to understand the specifics of the situation, but if there's no really good concrete reason, I'd be looking for another chair.
Yeah.
Well said. So let me wrap up, unless there's any other comments from either of you today.
We're a little bit over time. We should
Kevin, you can email me that. I can answer that for you. That's fine.
So please feel free to connect with our presenters today. I'm sure they'll look forward to your connection. If you'd like to be put in touch with Mike or Julie after the session, please indicate your interest on the survey at the end of the webinar as you exit. Now, we've got a great lineup of webinars coming at you from July 6th. This is a really great one, Ask Me Anything Governance. It's an open-ended Q&A session, which will be fantastic. And then I'll draw your attention to number 56, How to Govern with AI. This is a really practical hands-on session, which you should book into your diaries. You can find out all about our webinars on the Board Pro website. So just as you leave, don't forget to complete our 1-minute survey and go into the draw for our hamper. We'll announce the winner later on today. So thanks to everybody for your attendance. I hope you enjoyed the session. Thank you, Mike, Julie, and Brett for your comments. We look forward to seeing you all at our next webinar on July 6th, which of course is Ask Me Anything Governance, an open Q&A session. And this will be with our governance experts, Steve Bowman, Sonia Byers, and Simon Tilfer. So thanks again, everybody. Have a great day.